Probably. No further question. Okay. Any closing statements, closing remarks? Yes, Your Honor. Counsel Daly, please. Defense counsel.
Ladies and gentlemen, Victor's death was a tragedy, but the law does not require that every tragedy be punished. Not every death must be assigned blame. And in this case, it is undisputed that Danny was infected with this terrible disease through no fault of his own. And the defense has shown that the disease had begun to affect Danny before Victor's death. It is also undisputed that by the time the police arrived, Danny had already progressed into the later stages of the disease. The defense has also shown that Danny's behavior and symptoms were consistent with zombieism at the time of Victor's death, not consistent with a healthy, rational person planning to commit murder. A zombie does not know the nature and quality of their actions. A zombie does not know right from wrong. In other words, they are legally insane. And the law does not punish the insane because they do not know what they are doing. And they do not understand that they may be harming others. They do not understand good and bad, legal and illegal. Danny was a zombie at the time of Victor's death. And so Danny was legally insane. The miracle of modern medicine has cured him since then. But that cannot and does not make a difference, does not change the innocence of this alleged crime. The defense asks you to find the defendant, Danny, not guilty by reason of insanity. Thank you.
Mr. Davidson, any closing remarks?
Yes, Your Honor.
Prosecution, closing remarks, please.
The prosecution does not dispute that Danny was infected with the zombie virus. Indeed, the prosecution does not dispute that he eventually moved to the end stages of the disease. He was admitted to the hospital around 4 o'clock. It's clear that this has been true. But this isn't really enough. We need to grant the defendant's defense. You need to find that he entered the end stages of the diseases in a very, very narrow window before the time of the killing. Remember, Victor was killed around 1 o'clock, shortly thereafter. But Dr. Posios testified Danny was exhibiting behavior, suggests that Danny was more or less with it as late as midnight. And we know that when the police show up at 3:15, 2 hours after the killing, that Danny was certainly exhibiting signs. So at some point between midnight and the police showing up, possibly in addition to the hospital, Danny became so affected by the zombie virus that, as both experts have testified, he would have been legally insane. But you have to find that this happened before the killing. A very, very narrow window, some 60 to 90 minutes, and, Dr. Conlon testified, at the very, very short end of the normal progression of this disease. If Danny passed into the end stages of the disease after the killing, he was sane during the killing, and the defense does not work. So has the defense carried its burden? Have they proved that it was more likely than not that Danny was a zombie when Victor died? I don't think so. There's some evidence of that, yes, but I think the weight of the evidence suggests that Danny knew what he was doing, he was motivated by personal and professional desire to kill, and kill he did. I suggest to you that the evidence says that it's more likely than not that Danny was in his right mind, legally sane at the time of the killing, and you should find Danny guilty and hold him responsible for his actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, some instructions for you. The defendant must prove that it's more likely than not that he was legally insane when he committed this crime. Remember, the defendant was legally insane if, when he committed the crime, he had a mental disease or defect, and because of that disease or defect, he was incapable of knowing or understanding the nature and quality of his act, or was incapable of knowing or understanding that his act was morally and legally wrong. So at this time, please take a minute to figure out a verdict, and I want it in a minute. a mock trial, that's a mock minute, so let's go ahead. All right. Have the ladies and gentlemen of the jury reached a verdict? Okay. Just out of ease to understand what the verdict will be, for those jurors who feel that the defendant is guilty of the crime of murder, please raise your hand.
What?
Guilty of the crime of murder. For those who feel that the defendant should be found not guilty by reason of insanity, please raise your hands. By a show of majority, the ruling is not guilty by reason of insanity. Now, just a lesson here as to what might actually happen in real life, stepping outside the mock trial here for a second. If someone is found guilty, generally it's pretty clear they become incarcerated or they go on probation. However, if someone is found not guilty by reason of insanity, they tend to go to a forensic hospital where there's treatment, and they're treated for whatever mental illness it is that was found during their sanity evaluation. And they're held indefinitely until they're not dangerous any longer. So that ends our mock trial and ends our presentation. Dr. Pozios and others are going to make a few comments, and then we'll take Q&A.
Yes, so I just want to say really quickly, thank you all for staying through the mock trial. Give yourselves a round of applause. Obviously here at WonderCon, a lot of people are going to be flexing their geek cred, and you guys just sat through a mock trial about a zombie, please NGRI, with real doctors and real lawyers on the panel. You guys have serious geek cred. One other thing. In California, if the jury is going to find the defendant not guilty by reason of insanity, that needs to be a unanimous verdict. So what we had here, he's guilty. Now here's the thing. The judge is not going to accept a hung verdict after 30 seconds. He's going to make you sit there for at least a day and think about it.
That was the fastest jury service you've ever done.
Yeah. But if the jury can't come to a unanimous verdict, the judge will look at it and say, okay, is there enough evidence here to retry the sanity issue? If there is, they try it again to another jury. Judge doesn't want to do that. What he's likely to do is say, sorry, he wasn't successful, the conviction stands.
Okay. So with that, why don't we go ahead? Action. Go ahead.
And just so you know, we decided behind the scenes when we wrote this thing, Danny was not guilty, in fact, so you made the right choice.
And actually, the fact that it was so close, it does mimic reality, because the vast, vast majority of NGRI pleas are unsuccessful. And only 1% of pleas are successful.
And actually, it's even less than that. It's 1% of pleas are 1% of pleas are NGRI pleas, and of that 1%, only a quarter are successful. So it's 0.1%.
Questions?
Questions, please.
Do we have any way of getting a mic to the audience? No. Yes? No?
We'll repeat the question.
Yeah, we'll repeat it. So, right here.
So, Danny was convicted in a premeditated crime without committing, but ended up not moving to the ultimate state. Does that have any effect on
Smart cookie. Yeah, this was the question we thought for sure we would get. So in reality, what's going on here is that Danny is almost certainly actually guilty of attempted murder. That if he had already formulated the intent to commit the murder, and then only later, and then started taking steps to go commit the murder, like he was headed over there, or taking some substantial step towards it, and then became insane. He had already committed the crime of attempted murder by that point, but that was kind of a technical point we wanted to call us over in one trial. So thank you very much for pulling that detail out right at the beginning.
I actually wanted to add to that. So the voluntary ingestion of substances generally disqualifies the NGRI argument. Now, if somebody is slipped a Mickey, for example, given a substance that they didn't know they were ingesting the substance, or the consequence of ingesting the substance was unforeseeable, that could make their argument legitimate. That could allow them to plead NGRI.
tie-dye.
So what would be the legal ramifications of being aware of a degenerative mental illness and your obligations to stop yourself or get away from others? In the case of if Danny knew he was early stage zombieism and knew that he was about to become a danger to others by being around him, what legal obligations did he have, and and how would that affect him?
So basically the question is, if Danny was aware that he was in the early stages of the disease and he could potentially be a danger to others, what effect might this have on his belief?
So there's a couple of potential issues there. One I'll talk about is the analogy to epilepsy. This is kind of a favorite analogy we use when we talk about the Incredible Hulk. For reasons might become obvious, I don't know, maybe not. If someone with epilepsy gets behind the wheel of a car and then has an epileptic seizure and causes an accident that can kill somebody, the legal result depends on whether or not they knew they had epilepsy. If they knew that they had epilepsy, then that is probably something like involuntary manslaughter. They certainly didn't intend to kill somebody, and when they had the seizure, they weren't in control of themselves. But nonetheless, they knew that there was this risk. It's like negligent homicide or involuntary manslaughter, depends on what the state calls it. But if they didn't know they had epilepsy, then they didn't know of the risks. They thought they were fine. So it's the same kind of thing here. If Danny knows that he's getting very, very sick and soon he's likely to lose control of himself, then even though he's not in control when he hurts someone, he may have an obligation to seek treatment or try to avoid people or something.
This is especially true if he was already in a murderous rage.
Right. A related issue is the issue of infecting others, and liability for infecting others with diseases when you know you're sick, like in the HIV context, is a really thorny issue that I'm not personally up on, and I'm not competent to comment on.
Can I add to that? So actually this issue is very complicated, and a real world analogy for us as forensic psychiatrists is, let's say somebody has a kind of a severe mental disorder disease and they choose to go off of their medications. So and then later they commit a crime and they are insane at that time. So actually in those kinds of situations you still can qualify for an insanity defense. So I think this would be a difficult thing. They would probably look at the foreseeability, with a reasonable person now, but who knows with the zombie virus.
Now, if you'd gone out and deliberately got infected, that's something else again.
Back to